time. And let's start with
I will let Mr. Taylor call the school board.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the school board to order. School board members present. Our student school board member is Ava. Ava, stand up. I don't know if they know who you are, but Ava is our school board representative. And, you know, in the line of things, she's number one, really. So we're glad to have her, and I just wanted them to see you and know who you were. So thank you, Ava. Mrs. Sears is here. Mr. Fortune is here. Dr. Hubbard is here. And of course, I'm here. And Mr. Kelly and Dr. Rollins Fells are online. So we have a quorum.
And I am Nancy Long, Chairman of the Board of Supervisors for this session. And I have with us today Mr. Moorhan, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Cully, Mr. Black, Mr. Seeley, and Mr. Underwood would like to zoom in with us on, and we need a motion to allow that.
So moved. Second.
The motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. David, let us know when you got on. Good? Okay. So. shall we-
Okay. Yeah, what we can do is, again, thank you for this opportunity to meet the board and the school board together, and for those who are present. And I'm gonna ask Dr. Calveric to kind of give some opening remarks and get us started, and then we'll go from there, okay?
Everybody's plan.
All right.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. We're grateful to have a large chunk of time to tackle a topic that I know is near and dear to many hearts in this room and out in our community. This evening, we are joined by RRMM architects who have been working alongside us since April of last year to facilitate both a study about demographics as well as a facility study that was comprehensive in nature and included all 5 K-12 buildings in addition to all of our auxiliary spaces. And so this evening, what we were hoping to see occur, if there is collective consensus, is that we will invite forward Mr. Dwayne Harver, who is the outgoing CEO and president of RRMM Architecture. They're in the process of swapping the reins over a year-long transition. And his partner that is with him tonight is Jeff Harris. They are going to really serve as the facilitators, sharing knowledge and answering questions. The goal would be to start with the demographic study, of which all of the materials, of course, were provided in advance. And we do, I believe, I hopefully can get a wink nod from Mr. Souther. I believe we have the demographer online virtually. So she will be able to help really debrief the demographic data with great brevity, but also depth. Once we move out of the demographic study, we'll move right into the facility study. And that is where our gentlemen will really take the lead and hit the ground running. They will take questions according to, I guess the slide may indicate where a question period would be appropriate, but I'll leave those directives to you. And then we'll pause for dinner and maybe grab food. And depending on time, we can meet and eat and or pause for a legitimate dinner. And then post dinner, the goal would be to roll out the 4 recommendations that were birthed from the marriage of the demographic data and the facility study data. Both were aligned and they were able to generate multiple options for us, of which the school board used a rubric to evaluate and narrow down 4 options that will be shared tonight. By no means are they the only options. This is the infancy of this process, and that is why we're together and we're meeting with all kinds of advisory committees to garner input from our stakeholders. We know this is a process that is needed, but it is not one to be hasty about, as it is a huge community commitment in terms of time, effort, and funding. And so at the end of the rollout of the 4 options, we will engage in an activity where we'll put 2 board members from the school board and 2 board members from the Board of Supervisors together. And you will work on a 4-square document where you will talk specifically about what we think the strengths, the concerns, the recommendations that you would provide or suggestions, and the questions that you have, so that we can get that feedback and pull that together, and we'll share out at the end if time allows.
Dr. Kabir, my one comment is, as far as the last 2 steps go,
Yes, ma'am.
that we judge that on time.
Sure.
Also how board members feel after the report. We may want time to sit and discuss. I'm sure you and your board sat and talked about this since the study's been
Sure.
going on. We have not. So I'm going to say at this time, let's take it up to the dinner break
Sure.
and then decide where we're going to go after that. Is that all right?
And I will yield to our board to make a decision in relation to that suggestion.
We can do that. Once we break for dinner, we can determine then what the best means is to proceed.
I will share for
We can have people at work, including yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And you are correct. We have been working with this data since the first delivery of the study in September was when we rolled out to the community the demographic study, and then the facility study was in October, or vice versa. Excuse me, vice versa. Thank you. And we met with the administrative team of the local government as well. So we have had this for a longer period of time, so I can appreciate the need to digest. But I also want to share that we have rolled out the recommendations to the public. And so we want for the Board of Supervisors to be equally knowledgeable. So no one wants anyone to be put in a position where you're talking to a constituent and you don't have the same access to info. So we just want to make sure that you're cognizant of that, that we have moved forward with meeting with advisories and that is out there. Okay. Okay. All right. At this time, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Dwayne and Jeff.
Okay. Chairman Black, Chairman Taylor, members of both boards, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present to you here tonight. And there's a lot of information, so it's probably good that there's a few breaks in there for questions and to have some dinner. We are going to go through the enrollment projections and capacity calculations that Future Think and Tracy Healy with Future Think did these enrollment projections for us. Jeff's going to talk about the facility assessments, and then I'll finish up with the options discussion. So Tracy Healy is on a Zoom call. Can we bring her on now? Everybody hear her? Okay.
We can hear over here.
Give me just a minute here.
We get some frigid cold coming in. Like we haven't seen that already.
Well, this week,
This week.
cold wind.
Yeah, but they're talking about.
Cold, 3 days of chance of snow.
Next week.
If you could give us just a minute, we're trying to make some changes to the audio.
Is this breathing rain is really weird.
I didn't hear about a polar vortex. That's next week. Who said that?
Innovation.
Who said the polar vortex? Where did that come from? Is that legitimate?
Yeah,
Next one.
it's a segment of it that's broken loose, and it's gonna work its way all the way across again.
That's bad words.
Yeah, it's taboo. We are at the tipping point of makeup time versus no makeup time.
But the
So.
board needs to stop that. You don't need to stop it.
Yeah, wield your power with Mother Nature, right? Yeah. Well, I did see freezing rain possibility.
That's Wednesday.
For,
Yeah.
It's only be high 35.
this Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Tracy, can you do a test for us?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Much better. Thank you.
So how you gonna go?
Okay, we'll just advance the slides for Tracy, but she is the owner and president of Future Things. Been in operation since '06 with 25 plus years of experience. She's worked all across the country in 1,000 plus different districts and brings that national perspective that we like to have, many case studies and lessons learned. And she is the sole provider of enrollment projections for the state of Ohio. So with that, I'll start advancing slides for Tracy.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening and talk a little bit about the demographic study and how we project enrollment. There are several pieces of data that we collect. Most important being the historical enrollment and birth data. That gives us history of what's happened within the division, as well as what's happening in terms of the number of births that serves as a pool of future kindergartners 5 to 6 years later. We also look at the population estimates and projections for the county as a whole, so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening there and get a profile of the division, if you will. We also look at housing data, and this is really important with a lot of prospective housing in the pipeline and underway within the county. So getting a handle on that is very key to having the enrollment projections. Then if there are any other variables that take a look at that may help or impact the future student enrollment, we'll look at that as well. So on the next slide, with the historical enrollment, what we've seen over the last 10 years is an increase of 207 students or 5%. Since the COVID year, 2020-21, we've seen an increase of 433 students. So after we saw a return in 2021-22 to just over 4,200 students. And then we've seen increases since then in terms of enrollment. And again, I'll mention that we did the study prior to the school year starting. So we didn't have the 24-25 data at that time.
If I could interject, I do actually have that with us this evening. Our fall 24-25 number, which is inclusive of pre-K, also the data before us is as well, is 4,602. 4,602. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the pre-K number?
We have, if I'm reading this correctly, 234 slots.
Okay.
234 slots.
We move to the next slide. Looking at breaking down from pre-K, we just talked about, we've seen an increase of 116 students, and 95 of those students were attributed to Head Start. So that's where we've seen kind of that great increase there. Over the 10-year period, we've seen a decline in the K-5 enrollment of 54 students. But again, over the last 3 years, we've seen that consistently increasing as well. Over the 10-year period, we've had an increase at the middle school of 52 students and at the high school of 93 students. And the next slide also took a look at homeschool enrollment. Nationwide, we saw an increase during the pandemic. The same here, we saw an increase up to 426 students. And that has held pretty steady over that period of time. Again, last year at 427 students. And the next slide, in terms of births, looking at that at the county level, so we look back over a 15, 16-year window. So again, we look at the number of births versus the number of kindergartners five years later. So that serves as our pool of potential kindergartners. We've seen kind of a decrease. There was a peak in 2013 at 412 births. We've seen a low in 2019 of 323, and really over, kind of those last 5 to 6 years, it's been between that 320 and 360, 370 range. So a little bit less than previous years. On the next slide, we have some general demographics, and looking at the overall total population. And these are data points I should mention that are purchased from the group called ESRI, which is the group that does a lot of the ArcView, ArcGIS, all of the geographic information systems. So they use data points and a variety of sources to look at estimates and projections over a period of time. So I use this data to really just help inform my student enrollment projections. Again, this is looking at the entire county as a whole. So when we're looking at these age groups of 0 to 18, that includes also students who attend, private or parochial school within the county as well. So, overall, we've seen an increase in the total population over that 5-year or it's projected to increase about 5%. The total 0 to 18 is projected to increase by 2%. One thing I will note as far as this data is concerned, is that they don't take projected housing into account when they're looking at this. So they're looking at a variety of data points, but they don't look at housing that is not underway within that. The next slide shows, kind of where within the county the population growth is, as well as the decline. And this is, again, looking at the total population. So the, areas, kind of in the east, southeast, eastern portion are the areas where it's projected to increase, where this little lavender and kind of brownish color are projected to decrease. And that's with the total population. And again, this is, the data that we purchase from ESRI. The next slide shows ages 5 to 18. So we're looking at the school age population, which is projected to increase by about 1% over that 5-year window. And then the areas in purple are projected to decrease, and areas in shades of the green are projected to increase. So again, that's eastern part of the county, and then a little black in the western, like midwestern piece. The next slide looks at the study that was done by the National Association of Home Builders back in 2020. And they looked at averages of the number of students that could be expected per housing unit. So on average, in the national average, the table on the left, see for every 100 new single-family detached homes, could expect about 43 students. For single-family attached, you could expect about 21 students for every 100 homes. And then for multifamily, you could expect about 12 students for every 100 multifamily unit. So that's nationally, and then they also looked at it by state. So for the state of Virginia, for single family attached, we get about 44 students for every 100 single family homes that are detached.
about 55 students for every 100 for single family attached. And then for multifamily, about 13 students for every multifamily, 100 multifamily units. So again, looking at that, because there is so much housing going on or projected to happen within the county, we wanted to, look at what the potential impact could be for students. So just historically, the number of single-family building permits in the county has ranged from about 73 single-family building permits to 348 was peak in 2021. This table shows through July of 2024, and I did look up where we're at, and that data is available through November, and that was 291 single-family units through November of last year. So wanted to get an idea of, the rate at which building is occurring within the county. So again, that helps inform the projections moving forward. On the next slide, took a look at what's happening in terms of new housing development. We've broken each of the development names out by single family, by townhomes and villas, and then by apartments. We had the total number of approved lots, what has been built or is currently under construction, and then what is remaining unbuilt. So for single family, we have just under 4,300 remaining unbuilt. For the townhomes and villas, we have 631 that are unbuilt. And for apartments, we have just over 2,100 units yet to be built. There are a few of these that are pending rezoning approval. And then additionally, there are the two other developments that have been approved, but no development has occurred as of yet in Haymont, which had 4,000 approved lots, and Carmel Church Station with just over 11,000 approved lots. So those two developments were not considered within the projections as we're looking forward, but all of these, on this table here in the new housing development were considered as we looked at projecting enrollment over the next 10 years.
What's the 1,400?
We have a couple of questions. Are you comfortable with the board members interjecting on this slide?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Mr. Sealy, you go, but I'll go.
I don't recall Pendleton having 1,400 apartments ever. I mean, I don't
They're
think,
scheduled. 656. You're not 656. Pendleton's got 656. Apartments. No, built. That's units.
some of this apartment, I don't recall, Floyd, maybe you do, but I don't remember any of them.
I just looked at the, I think I sent it out today, a site plan, I think showing apartments on it. You know how many apartments it is, Mr. Hughes? In Pendleton. It's none built, but how many were proposed? Big section. Where is that? Around on the backside.
And my question is, did you take out or take into consideration with the numbers, age restricted units in these numbers?
Since we don't expect students to come out of the age restricted, we did not include that as part of
Any
the
of the
projection.
buildings like in Belmont, the buildings that are age restricted are included in this number or they are not? You didn't separate, you wouldn't know how many numbers to take out.
Okay, so within the Belmont, the townhomes, some of those are age restricted?
Yeah.
Because we had asked that, in collecting the data, that any of the age restricted were not included, but we can double check and make sure that happened.
If they were included or not. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So could we request updated information in relation to that from Mr. Hughes, is that was the source that was originally provided.
Yeah, Maple, I know Maple Grove's 100% age.
Yeah, we did inform her that Maple Grove was age restricted.
I'm just telling you what it's supposed to be.
That's why she put the zero.
Right, and we had Maple Grove and Belmont Villas
Yes.
as age restricted, but those were are those the only two? Or do we think that there are more?
Are there some in Ladysmith Village? No.
No.
Maple Grove.
Would it be inappropriate to ask to validate this before we go forward? I mean, is this an accurate?
Dr. Hubbard, just so you're aware, this was provided to us from Mr. Hughes with planning and development. So we can certainly work with him if there's any concerns on those numbers and work with Ms. Healy.
If you find any difference, I would just send us an updated thing. You don't have to make a big deal out of it. It's just I needed to know if they were included or not.
We did inform her those two were age restricted. Now, if there are others, then we would need to be aware of what they are and we can let her know.
All right, thank you. Continue.
Yep. Are there any other questions on the new housing before we move to the next slide?
I don't see anyone.
Actually,
Mr. Forehead.
It was mentioned that the to-be-built homes were not included in these projections. Is that an accurate statement?
The to be built were not included in those previous house or population estimates and projections.
Okay.
But they are included in the student enrollment projections that we'll be taking a look at here next.
Okay, so not included for the general population, but yes, included for the school attendance purposes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, we'll move on to the next. In looking at the historical enrollment, we look at the change grade to grade, year to year. So this table shows that. So if we look at the K-1 column, for example, that is measuring the number of first graders as opposed to kindergartners the previous year. So on average, we could see that there's 102%. We have 2% more first graders than we do kindergartners the previous year. So again, we're seeing that growth from K-1. For 1 to 2, on average, it's about 98%, but you can see the last 2 years, that average is more like 103.56%. And across the board, we could see that there's, been growth in most of the grades on average year to year, grade by grade. High school is a little bit trickier because, we have students who leave to go to tech schools and other opportunities. Also, there's some, just based on how students are counted in 9th or 10th grade versus, based on graduation units. So there's some fluctuation there. But we can see, in 11th and 12th grade, then that picks up to more than 100%. So it's not necessarily students moving into the district or into the division in 12th grade, but it's really kind of that measuring out of how students are counted or classified within the high school year. But so on average, we're seeing, and as we've seen growth in the district, and that growth particularly over the last 3 years, those percentages of more than 100%. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Black.
I guess maybe this is for Dr. Calvert. So typically in a high school, your larger classes tend to be freshmen, and by the time you get to become the senior class, I mean, unless it's like if you take a class of starting up, in reality, you started with 400 kids in each class. I mean, it was all the same. I know you have different enrollments, but by the time they get to senior, there's usually an attrition rate. Some kids don't, you know, why is that? Why do we see numbers going up between junior and senior year as opposed to, you know,
Well, I believe that she was just explaining the data science behind those numbers, which would not necessarily be the same explanation I would provide, because we follow a 4-year cohort and we monitor those students on a quarterly basis to ensure that our students are graduating within that 4-year time frame. So could you please re-explain the data science behind the 9, 10, 10, 11, 11, 12 fluctuation of the average percentages?
especially the
Sure,
11, 12.
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, especially the 11, 12. I mean, that's
Sizable
it
difference.
doesn't make any sense because like it's when they do scheduling, like I know at like the high school I'm at, when they do scheduling, like usually there's less government classes on scheduled for seniors than there were U.S. history as juniors, just because you tend to some kids go into Quest or different programs. So I was wondering why your percentage is going up instead of percentage going down.
Yeah. And really, again, all this table is doing is looking at, maybe if we could go back several slides to the historical enrollment, where it had the increase of 100 or 207 students. Do you tell me when you get there? I can talk through it.
There you go.
He's there.
So again, so what the survival ratio table is just looking at, if we look at like the 2014-15 school year, there's 356 ninth graders. The next year, there's 315 10th graders. The following year, there's 275 11th graders. And then in 2017-18, there's 277 12th graders. So again, so we're just measuring that, what happens over time. So you can see based on this enrollment data, the 11th grade is typically less than what we were seeing in 12th grade. Part of what my thought, gosh, I am so sorry. That these students are, counted or classified, they may, be considered seniors. Everyone think they're a senior, they're enrolled in senior classes, but, in junior classes, but they may not have enough graduation credits yet to be counted as a full junior when this enrollment is taken. So we're looking primarily at October numbers here. So, but the chart is just really measuring that change grade to grade, year to year.
I got a question.
I do think one point that I want to share while we're on this slide, I had mentioned that the projection for 23-24, the enrollment was 4564, but as of September 30, I shared that we're at 4602. And I do want to point out the significance of that, because it will play into some conversations we have later. When you look at the projections they provide us, they give us low growth projections, moderate growth projections, and high growth projections. And all of our recommendations are based on moderate growth. But I do think this is an interesting stat that in September, we were at 4602 and we've grown since. The low projected number for this year was 4524. That was low growth. Then the moderate growth was 4623. So we probably are at that right now if we looked at January data. And then the high growth was 4679. So I think that that's just an important data point to consider as we roll forward, is that we are already surpassing the low projection of growth, and we're 21 seats based on our September 30th enrollment away from the moderate growth projection. So know that all of the recommendations that you'll see tonight are based on moderate growth. And that is a comment that came up at our parent advisory. If we're planning around moderate growth, what happens, we build whatever we need to build, we decide as a community, or whatever we renovate as a community. 4 years down the road, we're actually at high growth, but we've planned for moderate growth. How do we tend to that? So I just want to plant that seed, because I think that's an important piece.
I have a question, and maybe you can.
I have a question.
Explain. Go ahead, Reggie.
I have a question. So sorry, Jeff. I apologize for not being there tonight. But you saying your number is 4602. What comprises your 4602? Is that homeschool, virtual? How many butts are actually in the seats in the building for your average daily attendance or membership? I know membership goes up. So are you saying that right now you have 4,600 students in our buildings right now?
So
can you just go back and just do a breakdown? You have X number in preschool, which we're not funded for. So I'm interested in our K-12 numbers for students right now, because we're funded based on K-12 funding for the state and local. So can you give me a breakdown of where you're getting the 4602? When I go back and look at the composite index numbers that were paid on, I don't get anywhere near the 4,000 plus number. I get 4111, I believe.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's 40. So can you help me with that?
I can, absolutely, Mr. Underwood. So on September 30th, we submitted our data to the state, and that was inclusive of pre-K through 12th grade. We do receive funding for preschool. It's just not through standards of quality. It's through Title I, through Head Start, and through VPI. And so,
but I only want to talk about K-12 funding right now.
But I think it's important to know that number, because it is part of the space that is needed for growth.
I agree, but okay. I'm sorry, you go ahead and finish and I'll speak.
Okay, so it's 234 pre-K, 343 kindergarten, 353 first graders, 353 second graders, 358 third graders, 339 fourth graders, 324 fifth graders, 330 sixth graders, 323 seventh graders, 330 eighth graders, 368 ninth graders, 313 10th graders, 303 11th graders, and 331 12th graders. And that should total up to 4602, which was the September 30th number, which has since increased. Our enrollment has increased in the since September 30.
Now, those are students actually coming to the building, correct? It's not virtual. It's not any other program. Those are actually students coming into the building, correct?
This is everyone that is enrolled at Caroline County Public Schools. So it does not include homeschool.
My question is, are these students coming into the building? Are these virtual students, or these are students who are homeschooled? What is the actual number of kids coming into the building?
4,602 students are enrolled in Caroline County Public Schools.
You're not answering my question.
And, well, Mr. Underwood, if you'd let me finish my statement, you would get the rest of the message. This does not include homeschooled students.
That was my question. How many homeschool students are there?
Approximately 450.
Right, so you have 450 students are homeschooled.
Correct.
And yet we're talking about the facility, and you're not facilitating space or butts in the seat for the 450 kids who are homeschooled, nor is my priority. Oh, I'll get to that later. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have a question. I just was doing the stair step from ninth grade to graduation for all the years. So if you start at 2014, 15, you take the ninth grade and you go to 16, that's the 10th grade. Then you'd stair step to the 11th grade and then to the 12th grade. It just doesn't jive with what this when I was on the school board, how we ended up with final graduation. And I'm just curious how that works out. Because those stair steps are actually students 9th, 10th, 10th to 11th, 11th to 12th. And if you stair step those across, then it gives you the graduation rate. And I don't understand how the number, because we all agree that the senior year over the junior year is generally less and over the sophomore year.
It's not less students. It's different course requirements. We don't necessarily have less students our senior year. And oftentimes students that are juniors or even sophomores, their course requirements may not equate to the grade that they believe that they're sitting in. So you could have a student that thinks they're a junior, but credit-wise, they're coming in as a 10th grader. So what I would propose is that we move beyond this and continue to forge forward so you get the full body understanding and then write down specific questions so that we can continue to proceed. And then anything specific to some of these charts, we can send directly to the demographer and she can provide a written response. Would that be acceptable?
Just, it is to me, with one point of clarity, and to clear up with Mr. Underwood, I think it's a term that he was using, homeschooled, and you were thinking that's homeschooled, different program. I think what he is referring to, he's asking, is the state curriculum that's still part of the county. Does it exist anymore?
Help me understand what you mean.
Where you can take, you're considered part of Caroline County.
Virtual Virginia.
Virtual Virginia.
Yes, we do have students.
That's what he was asking.
We do have students that are enrolled in Virtual Virginia. That number, we can get back to you. It's small. It's shrunk each year post-COVID. My best guess would be upwards of 40 to 50 students max, but I would have to go back. Can you make that as a note so that we can circle back around? Those students, when they are enrolled, we do get their average daily membership for funding. They are able to participate in school counseling resources, special education resources. They can participate in athletics, but their core academics are done through Virtual Virginia. But it's about 50 students, give or take, but we'll get you back with a regular number for you.
Mr. Underwood, that answers your question, correct?
Yeah, that answers part of it. My only concern is that when we look at the composite index number, I don't see anywhere near the number of students that the composite index is based on, which we're funded by, that reflects the number that we're using tonight. And I don't see the same numbers in the DOE reports that I see in the historical data tonight.
That is
I'm
correct.
concerned that, excuse me?
That is correct. What you see for funding is associated with average daily membership. What we're talking about right now is enrollment, which are two different things.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. I understand that membership and enrollment are different and attendance are different.
Correct.
I do understand that. So it's not that I don't understand. It's just I want to make sure that when we're talking about facilities, we're talking apples to make sure. I mean, you're doing an umbrella, which I appreciate for numbers' sake. I'm looking at not only the facility, but I'm looking at the cost, which we'll get to later.
Right.
So I want to make sure we're all talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Absolutely.
And
I call it butt in the seat.
Same.
Correct. And our March 31st ADM, in which we were funded on local composite index for fiscal year 24 last year, was 4303.
Thank you.
Dr. Eric, if I could you tell me how the students that self-school on the Chromebooks at home, how are they counted? Which group are they counted in?
Sure. They are enrolled in the school division and they are part of average daily membership. So that means that we do receive funding for those approximately 50 students, give or take a number that we'll get back to you on. And so we do receive funding. That ADM money we utilize to pay Virtual Virginia in terms of the expense associated with that service. But they do, when you are enrolled, we do ultimately provide access to some of the extracurriculars and our support services for that student base. That is different from students that are homeschooled. Homeschooled students do not currently have access to any services and or extracurriculars because we do not receive that ADM base of funding.
So if they have a Chromebook, their count?
It is our Chromebook. If you are enrolled in Virtual Virginia, you use a school appropriated Chromebook for the work. Yes.
So
or at least you're issued one.
In your account, but they are not physically in your bill.
Correct. Not for academics. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Black.
I have one, and this is a very general question. When we look at the historic enrollment, one of the things that I get from my students a lot is the complaint about if you're talking about enrollment, the amount that are at the Lewis Park. And so I've seen, I guess, I was shocked to see that it wasn't a larger in the elementary school level, because I don't hear as much complaining about, hey, look, middle school and high school are overcrowded. Is it because most of them people are moving into the Lewis Park area, and so you have Pendleton, so that they're zoned for that, so therefore Lewis Park is at an elementary school level is growing at a much faster rate as elementary school than Bowling Green or Madison, or?
I do think rooftops and permits are absolutely part of that narrative, but I also will attribute that to it's not only that we are growing in the numbers, but we are growing in the need to diversify our services. So our special education numbers in the last 2 years have grown by 150 students, and whether that's internal identification or students that have moved in. And not only are we receiving additional students with special needs, but their needs are great. And what I mean when I say that is we are having to develop additional intensive support classrooms for autism, behavioral support, multi-disabled students. And so we're needing additional classrooms in order to be compliant with IEP services. Additionally, our English language learner population has grown, it has tripled, and we're having to bring in new staff to work with our English language learner students, and they also need space. So in addition to just sheer numbers within population, we also are needing space to accommodate the interventions and services that we're expected to provide by the law. So that is where you can walk through Bowling Green, Mr. Black. Bowling Green Elementary is over capacity. You'll see based on a slide that's coming in the future, and so is Lewis and Clark. Madison is about 40 some seats away from capacity. The middle is 100 something, and the high school is 100 something away from capacity based on the data that we have provided. And so you will see every nook and cranny legitimately being used at Bowling Green. You will find a tutor, an interventionist in every single space that could possibly be used.
So what you're saying is basically because you need more space for that certain population, you're running out of space for that.
It's a combination, absolutely. So whether it's a general education classroom we need, or if it's a special education classroom, the need and the demand is great from both sides. It's snowballing on one another. Good question.
Okay. Are we ready to move into the enrollment projection part?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So Dwayne, tell me when you get to number 17.
We're ready.
Are you there? Okay, perfect. So the first as we mentioned, we did projections that are low, moderate, and high, based on, rates of growth. Each of those consider, what's happening in terms of housing, how quickly housing is developing, what interest rates may be, how, those variables may change, within that 10-year window. So the first projection shows the low projection, which is an increase of 154 students over the 10-year window. As mentioned, right now, the actual enrollment for the 2024-25 school year is a little bit over what that projection is. And as mentioned, we also are looking at the moderate projection for planning purposes. This last column shows just the difference from, in each of the grades, and where we're seeing the most increases really are at the fourth and fifth grade level, and then the high school level as we look at that low projection. The next slide shows the moderate projection, which shows a significant increase of 18% or 816 students. This projection takes into consideration housing at the single family detached rate, kind of as it has been happening within the division, but then also seeing some of that single family attached, not including the age restricted ones that we know of, as well as the multifamily starting to come online as well. So this really makes the assumption that if we look at those state average yield rates, that about half of what's yet to be developed will occur over that 10-year window. So to get to that increase of about 816 students over time. The final projection is the high projection, which shows an increase of 28% or over 13 or just under 1,300 students over the 10-year window. Again, you can see, the difference from across the grades. As we're looking at that, most of that again is, in the middle and high school grade groupings, and that's really a result of that increase that we've seen over the last 3 years, moving its way through the system and continuing to pick up as we move forward. So this again, assumes that there's a higher level of housing. The rate at which housing is being developed is at a higher level, and including, all three categories of single family detached, and then the multifamily coming online as we move forward. So again, just the next slide shows the moderate projections utilized for the options to be talked about here later. And then the next slide shows the projections by grade group. So again, looking at the moderate projection, we expect an increase of 285 in the elementary schools, 197 in the middle schools, and 334 in the high school. The next slide shows the projections by elementary schools. So you can see about 83 student increase at Bowling Green, a 96 student increase at Lewis and Clark, and about 106 students at Madison Elementary. Again, to develop these by school projections, looked at historically what the survival rates have been grade to grade, year by year for that K-5 enrollment, working that forward, and then, where we're seeing development occurring. So those are the projections by elementary school. By middle and high school, we can see, increasing over, 200 students at the middle school and then at the high school, which is as well, to get up to 1,612 students at high school. So any other questions?
Can you go back a couple of slides? Thank you. That's it. Are the different colors, green, pink, and blue, are those the school attendance districts you have?
Yes.
So as we get to later on and start discussing if we build another elementary school, are you going to give us those before we decide where to place it, or we place it and then decide what's gonna happen? How's that process gonna work?
Sure. I think one of the drivers will be whether there needs to be land acquisition, if it's something we need to purchase, or whether we currently own property. So that would be a driver. And then second to that, we will have a consulting firm that we work with that has multiple constituent meetings that shows maps that overlay current zones to option 1 being changed, option 2, et cetera. So they visually can see it and weigh in, and that would be done well in advance. But what I think what we would want to do prior to that, of course, is evaluate the 4 options, see if there's a 5th and 6th that we want to create. Maybe what we bring forward isn't really meeting what the both boards are looking for and what the community is looking for, and then narrow it down to maybe 2 out of those 6, and then bring both of those forward with maps and with boundaries drawn both by magisterial areas, but also by school zones, and move forward from there.
And the last question is, you've got the address of every student in school, right?
Yes, we do.
Is there a map with all those addresses? And all those addresses plotted?
I'm going to yield to Mrs. Stevens because the GPS system for transportation would likely be the method for that.
Actually, as part of this process with the demographer, she will be turning over a system that has all the students that we reported to her and their mapped location.
So we would eventually be able to have a map of the county with a dot that represents where every student comes from, so we can see. Okay, great.
Good question.
Yeah. Yep, that's been created.
And we have heard back from our coordinator of student information systems. We actually only have 22 virtual students remaining in virtual Virginia, 5 at the middle school and 17 at the high school. It has gradually decreased the farther we get from COVID. So 22 total, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Seeley, is your stomach grumbling? I thought I heard you say something about food. Would we like to do just a quick dinner break? Do we want to meet and eat? Do we want to actually take a true dinner break? What would you prefer?
Does not matter to me.
We can go get something to eat and come back and eat and keep going.
I think that sounds like a great plan.
Continuous.
Okay. All right, let's do that then. We'll follow Ms. Pam's lead. It's all there. Okay, awesome. Thanks for joining. Thank you for organizing that.
Ladies first, but if you don't go fast. Oh, that's on.
Thank you, sir.
Call back for everybody say that.
All right, we're gonna take a recess tonight and we're gonna build a playground. And we will continue. So anyone listening at home, want to take a break, this is a great time to do it, or if you want to. To be back with it. Yeah.
Man.
Chaotic.
Are you well?
Phase two of the presentation relates to facility condition assessment. Sure.
And to allow bank game somewhere. Outside of the
Trey then rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency brain surgery. He's now in recovery. And David, there are still strong questions. The NCSD is now working on a detailed timeline for both of these classes.
you need to hear seminar.
We won't tell, but you got your back to the camera.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm couldn't even get away with that. To safely evacuate some that road to slide.
They're working on one.
Investigation. Or it turned out we're going to the next order suspect standing on hold.
We do, I'm sorry, we do have someone speaking through the speaker, however.
So you're talking about brain surgery.
So we don't need that.
I'm going to come back until we get everything set.
Right, so what is it and why is it important? It provides us a snapshot or an assessment, an objective assessment of each project and the condition at that particular time when the survey is completed. So it assists with forecasting funding requirements to address deficiencies, upgrades, renovations, and/or replacement any particular building in the system. So we assembled a team that has done a lot of assessments around the state. They're very well versed in what we're looking for, how to assess equally, make sure that we're providing, like I said, an objective opinion on it. Highly experienced team working together. Like I said, we've done this around the state and many years of experience to bring this assessment to you. Our PM&E consultant was Thompson Consulting Engineers. Our structural consultant was Fate Marshall and Francis. Our kitchen and food service consultant was Food Service Consultant Studios out of Richmond. And then our civil engineer was DHB. So we visited all the sites during spring break of 24. On April 2nd, we attended the 3 elementary schools he listed: English and Clark, Old Lady Smith, and Madison Elementary. On day 2, we visited the transportation building, Carolina Middle School, and the high school. And then on the 3rd day, we visited Bowling Green Elementary School, maintenance building, school board office, and the annex. Things that we're looking for: different types of systems, site conditions, any building condition that's visible. This was not a destructive investigation. It's strictly what we were able to observe. So when it comes to site conditions, we looked at concrete and pavement, accessibility on the site, stormwater management and site drainage, and athletic facilities. These are just some of the categories. Architecturally, we looked at the building envelope. We looked at the masonry facade, cracking, weeps, control joints, concrete sills for windows and doors. We looked at caulk joints around doors and windows and within those control joints, as well as exterior condition of painting, whether it be doors, window frames, what have you. We looked at interior finishes, including floors, walls, and ceilings, interior caulking as well, and those control joints, interior doors and windows and their conditions, as well as casework. ADA accessibility. This was a high-level assessment for these conditions that included accessible routes, maneuvering clearances, restrooms, whether they had grab bars or not, clearances, sink relationships to toilets and doors. We looked at signage. ADA has signage requirements, as well as door hardware. We looked at building code and safety. security, things related to OSHA. We looked at paths of egress. You can see in the picture on the left-hand side, there's a corridor that's blocked with some furniture. Trap hazards with doors. You can see those doors right there have the ability to be chained shut. That's not something that we want to see in the schools. Exit door hardware, emergency lighting. These are all things that we looked at. Roofing. We looked at the condition of the roof slope, whether water was ponding or not. Ponding water can degrade the roof membrane and insulation. We looked at roof drains themselves, debris and algae buildup. We looked at canopy, the conditions of those. Gutters and downspouts, whether or not they were holding water, if they're sloping in the right direction. Wall flashing, coping caps, and metal panels. When it comes to mechanical systems, looked at everything related to that. Heating systems, cooling systems, air distribution, as well as controls of the mechanical units. Electrical systems, same thing. Switch gear, so distribution, fire alarms, lighting, and specialty systems. Plumbing system, we looked at piping, the condition of it, whether or not it was insulated. Water heater, backflow preventers, and fixtures. Structurally, there's a little bit of overlap with what they look at versus architectural, but they're looking at masonry cracking, whether there's settlement in parts of the building, delamination with CMU or mortar deterioration. Looked at concrete cracking, steel columns and supports, as well as lintels over windows and doors. Fire protection systems, we looked at sprinklers. We looked at fire pumps, the alarm systems, as well as extinguishers. And then food service, we looked at equipment within the kitchen. We looked at the walk-in freezer coolers. We looked at serving areas to make sure that they were adequate, as well as trash disposal. Hazardous materials were not included as part of our assessment. We looked at the age of each of the buildings to determine if we felt like asbestos may be present, and that we'll talk about that a little bit later in the deferred maintenance. So as you can see, there are a lot of different areas that we looked at in each building. You can see the assessed area or the category on the left-hand side. You can see each of the elementary schools, the three elementaries, the middle and the high, are in the vertical column. And then you can see they were given various ratings based on their condition, varying from very poor to poor, fair, good, or excellent. So you can see how each category was rated at any given school. At the end of the day, when you look at the educational facilities, you had some fairly good ratings there for your school building. If we take a look at your auxiliary buildings, not quite the same story. You can see that civil, we didn't even get into the civil assessments of some of these buildings. But at the end of the day, when you look across the bottom, the average rating, you have a poor, fair, poor, fair, and then another fair. So your auxiliary buildings are suffering more significantly than educational buildings. So we take that information and we plug it into a deferred maintenance schedule.
Right behind Bowling Green Elementary, by the playground area.
Not where is it? I mean, where is it located?
Is that what you asked? I'm sorry. Yes, that's the maintenance building. Mhm.
Yes, thank you.
So we take all these categories and their rankings, and we plug them into a schedule called a deferred maintenance schedule. What this allows us to do is take the course systems or building elements in any given building, and we plug those into the first 3 years. So we reserve the first 3 years of the deferred maintenance schedule for very poor or poor items. And those play into your facility condition index, which we'll get into in a minute. When you look at items that are fair, good, or excellent, those get pushed out into the latter years. So we're looking at this type of category or rating. We're just taking this system right here. And what we do is we plug each problem item into this deferred maintenance schedule. We assign a unit and a cost, giving you an extended cost to replace or correct that deficient item, right? You can see they total up in the bottom column. In this particular instance, the electrical and technology systems total repairs in about neighborhood of $2 million. So as I was saying earlier, those most severe items are what we're looking to deal with more immediate than those items that are in good or fair condition being pushed in on the road. So as I said before, first 3 years are reserved for those very poor and poor items. The next 3 years are related to fair items. And then the next 3 years after that would be good. And then excellent would be the rest of those years pushed out. When you calculate those core items that are affecting the condition of your FCI, your rating of your FCI, that factors into where your dollars need to be focused to maintain that building in a functioning capacity. So when we look at those core items to calculate your FCI, what we're doing is measuring and evaluating the current condition of that school or that building compared to other buildings in the school division. This provides the owner with the means for comprehensively evaluating and finding appropriate distribution of available funds for each school or building within the portfolio of that school division. This is going to help with future planning on where money needs to be spent to focus those your capital improvement. So we take the deferred maintenance costs and we divide that by the total cost to replace that building for those systems in kind, and give you an equivalent building with those types of systems that we're referring to. The total dollar value of the deferred maintenance identified in poor and very poor conditions, the top number divided by the total value to replace that school building, defined as a requirement to duplicate the external building envelope and internal building systems and components, along with the site enhancements to provide the same level of functionality. All right, so the higher your FTI score, the worse shape your building is in. If you look at these ratings, excellent is a 0 to 5. That building is in excellent condition. Good would be a 5.1 to 10. Fair would be a 10.1 to a 25. And then a 4 would be a 25.1 to 50. And very poor would be anything above 50 in terms of your facility condition. So here's how they broke out. Lotus Academy has an FCI score of 45. That is your worst facility. You can see the top 4 buildings, all with poor ratings, are your auxiliary buildings. The Lotus Academy, Annex Building, Transportation, and the School Board Office. Your next worst facility would be Madison Elementary School. That has a fair rating of 19.97. You also see in the first column the deferred maintenance dollars that carry over from that schedule to show you what kind of repairs are essential and where that are most needed in each for each of the facilities.
In the first 3 years?
In the first 3 years, that's correct. That's the cost to just deal with the very poor or poor. Doesn't count anything that's fair or good in any of those given buildings.
What you're saying is, regardless of whatever option we're talking about, we need to spend $31 million to fix or maintain the buildings we have existing now.
That would be correct. That's just to keep them functional, really. all the way down to your best buildings with the good or excellent rating towards the bottom would be Bowling Green, Caroline Middle School, the high school, and then Lewis and Clark. That's your newest building.
Could I interject based on what you shared, Mr. Thomas? What we do choose for an option, should one be selected, does impact the deferred maintenance. Because let's say we elect to do a renovation of 2 buildings, it may positively impact the deferred maintenance, so that may go down. So that 31 million should decline based on what we choose, because what we choose would help address some of that and maybe eliminate some of the deferred maintenance from some of the auxiliary buildings.
Theoretically, you're right, because if you say we're going to build a new Lotus Academy, that's $7 million you don't have in
Correct.
deferred maintenance, but then that's 40 or $50 million we have in a new building.
Correct.
So 31 million is the minimum I have to spend to get, if I just said I'm fixing everything, that's the minimum I have to spend.
For those first 3 years of capital improvements, absolutely.
Now, I have the follow-up I had was, do you have a priority or prioritization of all of these elements?
Yes.
Where's that?
That is in the deferred maintenance schedule for each of the buildings.
No, I mean for these buildings. Do I do? I just hit the lottery. I got $31 million in my pocket. Do I do Lotus Academy first?
We have options that will be presented later.
Do you have priorities?
We are not that far down the road. I think what you'll find within the documents that we shared with you, that all of the specifics associated with each building are listed, but we have not worked collaboratively with the Board of Supervisors and or constituents to prioritize. I think we need to look at options and narrow those down and then begin to do that as a secondary process.
And you will see when we get to the options, it's a master plan scenario for each one. So each option has more than just one facility addressed. So in the combination of facilities that go into that option, some may eliminate deferred maintenance based on the option. Others might factor it back in. So
Yeah,
that'll be clearer when we explain.
But it's like the example I just gave. We're going to build a new building instead of Lotus Academy. So I eliminate $7 million of deferred maintenance, but I got to find $30 or $40 million to build the building. That's
That
what I'm
is
saying.
true.
31 million is the bottom number to make our school facilities good or excellent based on your rates.
Well, not really. The 31 million covers those first 3 years.
Right.
But there are other things that will need to be addressed in year 4, 5.
Well, I understand there's continual maintenance that goes along with that. But I'm just saying, to get us all good or fair or good or excellent, I need $31 million.
Additionally, the building you're referencing that may be built, absolutely, it may cluster multiple auxiliary buildings together. So while you're building a new building for $32 million or whatever it may be, you might be resolving multiple buildings up there because they might be clustered together in one facility. So that is a possibility that you will see in options as well.
But still 31 million.
Your point is correct.
31 million is the minimum I have to
Your
spend.
point is correct. Yes,
I don't
sir.
understand the clustering, because Lotus Academy doesn't have anything to do with Madison.
So in some of the options of which you'll see, we identify a possibility of a building that would centrally locate all of the auxiliary buildings, including Lotus Academy and Chesapeake Bay Governor's School. So it would be a complex that would have all the central office facilities in one location, plus some of those additional programs, such as the Governor's School and the Alternative Education Building. So it'd all be in one building.
But you would still have Lotus Academy with those issues, right?
Yeah.
So yes, so you have, that is a great question. It came up with our students and Ava was there. It came up with our parents. That is a conversation for the the boards to have. What do we do should we vacate some of these properties? Do we gift them back to the county? Do we sell them and use profit associated with the worth of the property and the building and invest that profit into the development of a new building and or a renovation? So again, those decisions will come later once we have all of the information in front of us. And we'd want to hear from the community as well. No one would ever want vacated buildings to become decrepit and a community eyesore. That is the last thing any of us would want.
Everybody can just remind everybody, as we said earlier in the meeting, there's going to have to be lots of discussion, and people do have to work hard. I'm looking at all these people around here, administrators. So I'm going to suggest that whenever possible, we poll questions, but they might get answered in the presentation, and then we'll move forward with the questions after we finish. You can pick the paper.
I would like to address a comment you had or a question you had just a minute ago. The 31 million doesn't necessarily get all of your facilities to good or excellent.
Don't tell me it's more.
It's only addressing the poor or very poor items at any given building. There are other things that might fall in the fair or good category that still need to be addressed within, say, 5 years or 6 years.
Because that was a question that I sent. Ms. Stevens responded to me about priority. Thank you, Dr. Calvert.
So if we take another look at your types of facilities, at the top you have your FCI rating of your educational facilities. They're in very good shape. You guys are seem to be focusing your dollars where the students are located. So they average out to be a 6.18 FCI. That's very good. But as we said earlier, your auxiliary buildings are where things are not looking so popular. And you can see that those average to be about 36.5. Your maintenance building is 10.44, which is skewing that number a little bit. If you took that out, your average rating might be a little bit higher than that. So in summary, we want to just remind you that the assessments represent a snapshot in time. Now that was spring break of last year. The maintenance schedules have been modified to reflect some work that was completed in the summer of 2024. Your building is maintained with the money that you have. School appearance overall, they're in good condition. Your FCI scores range from poor to excellent for all your buildings. Again, with school buildings having very good ratings, your auxiliary facilities, not so much. Majority of your deferred maintenance dollars can be attributed to the age building systems, with plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and roofing equaling about 67% of those dollars that you saw. Site exterior, interior, ADA, code, safety, structural, fire, and food service are totaling approximately 33% of those dollars that we just shared. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. I was just looking at Madison. Madison was one of those ones when we did the referendum. I'm just kind of curious why.
We just added on there, and so there was a lot of that school wasn't touched.
If you're facing Madison from the front parking lot, the left side of the building is the renovated space that the bond referendum was tackling. The right side of the facility has very aged infrastructure, the plumbing, electrical, mechanical, the cafeteria. All of those aspects are in need of upgrading, the fire system, things of that nature.
It's $5 million.
$5 million.
The third part that remains is rolling out the options. But before we do that, we just want to make sure if there are any other questions associated with the facility information. That was a good high-level
So
overview.
we didn't see the 3 to 5 and the 7 to 8 for deferred maintenance. All you showed us was the 0 to 3.
You have the electronic report that was sent to you. It's
I'm just saying that
hundreds of
wasn't what was
pages.
shown though, right?
That was just the
That-
first
that's
3
just
years.
The first 3 years. That's the most dire need at each school, and that's what plays into creating that FCI, that index, that number.
Anyone else have a question? I have a quick one, Dr. When I was looking through your slides, and looking at the pictures of the buildings, do you all have a maintenance person who goes around like field spouts with erosion issues?
Right.
Man, that's an easy fix. Talking around calling people.
Sure.
That's an easy fix. I'm just wondering whose responsibility is that?
Well, we do have a supervisor of maintenance and facilities. He's actually with us this evening, Christopher Caldwell. He has a team, of course, that has a regular maintenance schedule for inspection of a wide array of areas in terms of building upkeep. And I believe, and you can interject if I'm speaking erroneously, but we can caulk and we can maintain, and we do those measures. But at some point, those become insufficient and it becomes a replacement component. So we are expanding the life of many of our systems. But you do reach a tipping point where it's no longer a wise investment to maintain. You've reached where the expense of replacement.
That's a wonderful political answer, but my statement simply is, if you have a house, you have an erosion problem, you
Sure.
can address it. The erosion problem gets worse.
Sure.
It doesn't get cured. And so I just noticed that in your pictures, so I wanted to make sure that you now have somebody who's in charge of overseeing all that, so that if we build new buildings, I'm not gonna see pictures with big holes and erosion issues, because we have somebody doing that. That's all I needed to know.
Yes, ma'am. We have a maintenance schedule, indeed.
I think you guys have a question there. Nancy?
Yes.
I think Mr. Hubbard had something.
I was just going to reinforce what the report also does. It articulates how you can prioritize your preventive maintenance plan going forward. So as you're looking at preventive maintenance at a strategic level, what this report does, it helps our hardworking staff here to pinpoint and to prioritize what needs to go first. So it's not a question of seeing ugly pictures. Yes, I had the same response for our team as well as my colleagues. It provides a preventive maintenance package that we can now take and really make actionable as we're going forward, reducing costs, because preventive is better than reactive.
Thank you. Well said. That's something we're
Yes.
starting on already. Great.
And we do school division facility assessments all over the state, and your division does a good job of taking care of the facilities. The truth of the matter is that things just get old and wear out sometimes, and there's no maintenance in the world that's gonna prevent that. It happens. and-
Every homeowner knows that.
Kind of what Mike was saying, Dr. Hubbard. Of the $31 million in maintenance, have you identified things that we should have done earlier that caused a bigger problem? And I'm not blaming anybody. Maybe the board didn't give the school board enough money. Maybe the school board tried to do something else. I'm not blaming anybody. But have you figured out, I now need to put a roof on because I didn't fix the repair? Have you matched anything out up, or you just said this is where it is?
That wasn't the purpose of the survey. It was to just document what his condition is.
And just have effects and no causes.
That's correct.
There's no way we can get causes, but we can interpret it.
What I can share with you in relation to that question is, as we do studies. So for example, throughout the ESSER time period, we did the air quality study at the middle school, and we used all of that data to prioritize. That is how we're obviously in the midst of the HVAC work. That was our number one priority that rose through the analysis of all of our buildings. And so we do use data to drive our decision making and put in the capital improvement requests. And that's why we also have been logging more methodically the annual submission of capital improvement, so we can have conversation with Mr. Cully about this has been something that's been on there for 3 years. Can we talk about elevating that this year and really lifting that work? So there is some longitudinal work associated with it.
Really, what I was looking at is it now costs us, and you showed a picture of, I guess, the ground separated from the brick. And then one of the back. That just doesn't happen normally. It's probably an erosion problem due to some leak or a gutter not working or whatever. And my point is, had I spent $150 to fix that gutter, would I not have a $2,000 foundation repair? Those numbers are the blue sky, but it's something like that. And that's really what I wanted to know, because as I'm saying, it's nobody's fault. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure we fix it so it doesn't cost us more later, which is something I've been saying since I had hair.
You're right. That wasn't the goal of our survey, but certainly any money that you can spend to prevent things from happening like that, you're going to save you some money.
Any other questions?
Okay, so we're going to move on then to option recommendation. So first, we collect data before we start these options because we use that data to inform us in order to make some. We looked at our enrollment data. We looked at the capacity of each school. How much growth space do you have within each school, if any? And so the third column is whether or not that, looking at the capacity, whether it's already over or when it would be over the capacity. So let's take Bowling Green, current enrollment of 811, the capacity of 809, so 2 students over their capacity. And when did they reach it? They're already there, 23, 24. And so as you go down the line, we have Lewis and Clark is the most under capacity already there, 23, 24. Madison has a little bit of growth with 46 students. Caroline Middle School, 116, and the high school, 159. And so if we take that data and we just kind of use it as a general basis for options to consider, it really kind of converts to within that 10-year span of enrollment growth, 5 classrooms at Bowling Green, 9 at Lewis and Clark, 4 at Madison, 4 at Caroline Middle School, and 7 at high school. So that's just part of what informs the options that we're going to share with you. So these have been developed and they've thoroughly evaluated, and they have some of the criteria that we kind of overlaid on this process, the things that are important: anticipated future growth, enrollment growth, the potential redistricting of boundaries, alleviation of overcrowding at schools, right sizing, are schools, the elementary school getting too big or undersized, the reduction, elimination of those deferred maintenance costs that we talked about already, looking at the potential new transportation center, and then how long does it take to that design and construct?
I apologize for interjecting, but I do think it's important to reiterate that these were the rubric criteria that was developed by the school board in partnership with RRMM and used to evaluate all 8 options that they originally brought forward. And a standard that you will see holding true through every option is the new transportation center. And so I want to take a moment to explain that is property in a building that actually, I believe, is owned by the county. We believe that it is essential in all options for a transportation facility to be built because we have 6 bays. Only one of them is able to take a 77 passenger bus and put it on a lift and do the 45-day state law required maintenance in addition to repair work. And our fleet has approximately 35 to 40 buses that run every day on the road of 77 passenger size. So I think that's really important. You'll see transportation center in all 4 options, and that is why. Okay, thank you.
So as I mentioned earlier, in these options, you will see a kind of division-wide proposal of various facilities. It's not just a single building. And so we'll have the information on the left side there for you, and then the images on the right will kind of describe the option that's shown in red. So we're starting with option 1, that is a new elementary school as part of that option, approximately 450 students. And we put a test fit, and it's just a potential site, but it's the middle school shown in white there, and then the space, the site between Rogers Clark Boulevard and the middle school. We test fit a couple of different prototypical footprints to see if they would fit, and they appear to.
That doesn't account for traffic or VDOT's idea of that property being used.
What a light. That's county property. Yeah.
And what's now the where that was, that's
School on the
I
corner.
think it's school property
To the right into transportation.
Yeah,
County.
we Caroline County, whoever at the end of that, we Caroline County.
Yep. Okay. We looked at a small addition to the middle school. That should be a 4 classroom addition, 2-story. I'll say that these additions that we have shown on here are very schematic. These are not the final designs.
They're not working drawings?
No, sir. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we had the size right so that the square footage would be indicated in the cost, which is very important. So this 4 classroom addition, a small addition to the high school, a 7 classroom addition towards the backside. And then finally, a purchase and renovation of a vacant building that most of you are probably familiar with. And that building is just under 72,000 square feet. And the school board office and the maintenance building would be located there. Also, Lotus Academy and Chesapeake Bay Governor's School would also be located there, and would still have some room for a community space within that.
To be determined in partnership between the county and the schools. We feel like there's an opportunity to pair with one another and to provide a space for the western part of the county to have something comparable to this fabulous location that we're certainly sitting in. So.
Yeah, there are some spaces within that could be well suited to assembly. There's lobby infrastructure.
We have not publicized what the property is. However, those in advisory committees that are very astute on Caroline history know what that land represents.
I see the square footage, but can you send me the numbers you had on that a year or so ago for doing the changes?
The analysis.
A lot of analysis about that.
Yes, for the good of the collective group. We had discussion with the county in the winter time of last year about a potential bridge plan, which included this vacant property. And so we did do an appraisal, a full plumbing, electrical, mechanical analysis on that facility to determine that it was still of high quality since it has been vacant for about 2.5 years. We certainly wanted to know that we were not even considering with the smallest amount of brain power, something that would not be operationalized in terms of functionality. So yes, we can reshare that analysis. We'll write that down as an action item.
So the last would be the transportation building. This is about a 36-acre property, so there's ample room to find a spot if this were to be acquired for the transportation building, about 15,000 square foot building.
We also I'm so sorry, Dwayne, to continue to interrupt, but just to throw it out there, we did talk about even having additional conversation about a county school-based transportation center and whether or not that would be beneficial for your fleet of vehicles. We don't know if that's a possibility, but it's certainly something I think we would be open to discussing.
Okay, so this is a summary of option one. And so we'll have the column of total construction project costs, and that is all in. That includes everything, including soft costs, design, all that. And then you'll have a column for the deferred maintenance costs for each of those. As you can see, some have it and some won't. And then we have a total over here on the right. So the new elementary at about 28.9, obviously no deferred maintenance. So that is the total cost for that. In the middle school addition, we showed you the $7.5 million in deferred maintenance that needs to be done. That's a small addition. It's about $2.4 million. The total is 9.9. Then for Caroline High School, kind of the same thing. We have a fairly small construction. It's exceeded by the deferred maintenance costs needed. And these costs here are through the 28, the 4-year period.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
A new elementary school is, 28 million seems very low to me.
This is a 450 student, so it's very small.
Yeah, that's, even with that, it seems a low number for the cost of a new elementary school. I mean, it's not to consider something that small.
Well, again, remember, these projections are based on moderate growth. So that would be what would accommodate moderate growth versus the high growth rate.
And all of these options carry us out for 5 years.
Well, this we're looking at a full 10-year period, other than the deferred maintenance.
Do you mean the duration of the project?
No,
Or the
no, I mean
Part of this, how much time to price?
basically, or the capacity this gives us, and why would I build a smaller elementary school as opposed to larger ones? But you go right ahead and not wait for me.
Okay, so these all projections were based on the 10-year demand. So then we have the vacant property, $12.5 million. And then the new transportation building, smaller building, 6.9 million.
If I may,
Yes.
does the 12.5 represent the purchase, acquisition, and the changes?
total?
Okay, thank you.
And then other deferred maintenance, that's everything that's not included in some of these concepts. So all your other 3 existing elementary schools, that's what's in there. So this option totals up at just over 85. So option 2, the new elementary school is similar, except that we have a school board office on the same site as the elementary school, about 25,000 square feet. And that would include administration and maintenance in that building. So those still are able to fit on the site. And then we looked at, I've already talked to you about this one, so I don't need to repeat it. It's a middle school edition. And then we had a larger high school edition on this option. It's about 20,000 square feet. So we had the same 7 classrooms. We just have kind of a generic block that you see at the top in the orange. And that will include the space for Lotus Academy and Chesapeake Bay Government School.
That would?
Yes. So it's a placeholder. It may want to be detached as a building anyway, but it's just the square footage needed for our cost estimate.
Is that 2 stories?
It's a total of, what, 15,000 square feet, so I think that's just a one story. The 7 is,
It's one story.
right,
Mhm.
one story.
I will share. We have had feedback both at the parent advisory as well as student advisory in relation to Lotus Academy and Chesapeake Bay being located on the same campus. There appeared to be, in the small sample size of both of those groups, 40 students and 30 parents approximately, that there was a desire to have it remain separate for various reasons, for Lotus Academy and for Chesapeake Bay. What we had shared the reasoning is for shared resources. So our special education teachers would have greater access to students with special needs in Lotus. Our teachers at CBGS could possibly teach classes at the general high school and vice versa. I think, Mr. Black, you probably are very familiar with that model for the Commonwealth Governor School. So we felt like resource sharing was a real strength, but I don't know as if our parent population and our student population view it in a similar light, which is just something to be cognizant of.
Okay, and last in this option is transportation building, and basically it's just saying that it assumes that it would be on property somewhere owned by the school. Okay. In summary, the new elementary school plus the school board is a bit higher, $41.7 million. New transportation is still at 6.9. Middle school addition remain the same at 9.9. And the high school is a bit higher than just the 7 classroom addition. And that goes to 18.7 million. And then we have the same deferred maintenance, 15.6 million. So this option totals up just over 93 million. Option 3, we start with the purchase and renovation of the vacant available building. This is the same with the exception that a pre-K center would be placed here. So a pre-K center here would relieve some pressure from the 3 elementary schools in terms of student enrollment. But it has to be understood that there would be the youngest students in the division being transported, to here to a central location away from their elementary schools. And I think that's one of the negative aspects of this one. But we have studied, and there is, we could create a pre-K center at this site. It would require an addition. Small addition is the same on this option, and the same large addition you just saw, and the same transportation. So option 3 summarizes with a higher cost for the vacant property, $13.4 million. And then you have pretty much the same cost that you've seen for the transportation, the middle school and high school, the larger additions there, and so this is a $64.7 million.
Can I ask another question? How does this take care of your problem of elementary school?
So I was just going to share, that's a great question, because we would be pulling 15 classrooms out of the 3 elementary schools. So that would alleviate some need for classroom space, but we would need to do an analysis to make sure that that would be sufficient. And my concern is really at Lewis and Clark in relation to the number of classrooms that would be pulled out of there. The other aspect that Dwayne mentioned is the transportation. So you have families who are our most at-promise households, many that are eligible for these programs, these pre-K programs. And we would be asking them to transport, rather if you're in Port Royal and you're accustomed to transporting to Bowling Green, this would be transporting their 3s all the way to the Carmel Church location of that vacant property, because we don't transport 3-year-olds right now. We transport 4-year-olds, but then we would also need to accommodate a transportation route from all across the county to this central location. It's a very common model, but many counties are not 550 square miles. So it's just a factor to consider. It also does not require redistricting. Number 1 and 2 require redistricting. Options 3 and 4 do not require redistricting.
How many 3-year-olds do we have now?
Oh, geez, Mr. Seeley. Well, we have 234 K slots, and I would have to come back to you. What did you say?
I believe we have one classroom of 3s, and then we have our ECSEs also, our early childhood special ed students.
Let us get back to you.
Are those in the enrollment numbers?
They are in our enrollment numbers. It's pre-K.
Enrollment. Not average daily membership, but an enrollment. Because of course they're in our building. We service them every day. And we have to have space for them.
Well, Vic, I can ask you
Full day
to,
school.
in very simple terms, explain to me, Head Start should be K, right? That is a federally funded program.
Yes, ma'am.
So, how does that, do we still get paid per child like we do for regular enrolled? And how did you all get into doing that? So I always thought, for a long time, I was under the impression that Head Start was generally done by an independent specialist.
Sure. So we have 3 points of entry for preschool, 4 really. Early childhood special education classrooms where students have disabilities. We have Head Start, which you just accurately described, and that is federal funding. That's the most stringent of eligibility requirements. Then we also have Virginia Preschool Initiative, which is another pathway. The criteria for gaining entry into that program is less stringent than Head Start, and we get funding from the state by student. And then the third program that we have is Title I preschool, and we get funding from Title I, which is also federal money. We braid our monies because it doesn't matter to us if Dr. Hubbard, Mr. Fortune, Ava, and Ms. Stevens all come in under different programs. We're going to blend the funding together and put them in classrooms together. So it's not as if your child applied, we'd say, oh, you're Head Start. No, you're #1 preschool.
Do you still get state money for the Head Start or the other programs if they are not already funded,
We get federal money for Head Start.
Right, but you don't get any addition for any of these programs. Each program pays its own rent.
Yes.
We have 95 students that classify as Head Start, and we get over $1 million grant for those. Then we have Virginia Preschool, which is about 104 students currently, and a 3-year-old class. And we get state funding for those on a per pupil basis. It's around $6,000 and some per student. And then we have the Title I, which they are funding the positions that are in those classrooms.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And those programs are full day, not half day.
They are full day. Yes, sir. And they go to resource classes, art, music, PE, library. They're fully matriculated into the elementary environment.
Thank you.
Yes.
Curriculum's the same?
In all 3 programs, absolutely. And that was the benefit of us becoming the grant owner of Head Start, because it was owned, you were exactly right, Ms. Long, by a third party. And there were such inequities between programming and staffing requirements and transparency of data that the person that owned the grant previously was removed, and then it became an open application and we applied and were granted as the awardee. And it's been wonderful to have one point of entry for parents. They can apply one time and we can look at them in terms of all 3 of those programs. And then of course, exceptional ed is separate in terms of entry point.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, option 4. So this one has a small addition to each elementary school, and we'll go through each one of those. Beginning with Bowling Green here, we have 5 classroom addition on one end of Bowling Green, about 6,300 square feet. And then Lewis and Clark Elementary School, a little over 11,000 square feet, 9 classrooms.
Can I ask real quick? I thought that was a planning thing, but I thought that was as big as that building, big right now.
We would have to go back to the homeowners association. We believe in viewing the HOA guidelines that they have modified their guidelines, which now indicate that modifications could be entertained, but we would need to go back and seek HOA approval. Now, we haven't looked at that. We haven't looked at that in quite some time, but when we were talking about the bridge plan, we had investigated it. I did not. Did you you and Chris pull the deed?
We have the deed. Yes, we have the deed.
Yeah, I just got that from Mike Fincham, so I've never looked at it. Here.
I believe we looked at both of them. I'd have to recall.
We'll
what
write
we
that
read.
down as an action item.
And then also on here.
Some funny things in the deed.
Yeah.
And the developer still has the 3-2 majority over any control of the HOA.
Well, we'll go back and look at it. I guess another question that's begged from this option is the right size criteria of an elementary school. It's already sitting at 1,000 students. It would be larger than our middle school if we added these classrooms on. And then you also have to think about traffic flow for Ladysmith Village. So those are two aspects that I know are important to consider. So.
Okay. And then Madison Elementary School, in addition out back, 4 classrooms. And we're back to some of the other ideas we talked about, small middle school addition, large addition to the high school, and then the purchase and renovation of vacant buildings. And this would include the school board maintenance and the community section. And then lastly, the transportation.
And this option for the community space is sizable, 48,000 square feet. This is the largest community space option because Lotus Academy and Chesapeake Bay remain in the large addition. But as we mentioned, the feedback we've received so far would be to have them be in the vacant building versus at the high school. So that might be a tweak if we liked this. But it's important to know we specifically brought 2 options requiring redistricting and 2 options not requiring redistricting because we know that can be an emotional time period for a community when you're looking at redrawing boundaries. So.
Okay, in summary for option 4, we have the Bowling Green addition at 3.8 project cost, and it's in 8.7 in deferred maintenance. And one of the reasons we use the 4-year period in these on the deferred maintenance is because it'll take 4 years to get these projects, most of them completed. And so by the time you get to that, past the 3rd year, you might as well include the 4th year of deferred maintenance. So that's why it's there. But it's a $12.5 million total for that. Lewis and Clark with a $7.3 million total. Madison with a $9.4 million. The vacant property in this option is $8.7 million. And the same cost for the new transportation building and the middle school addition and the larger high school addition. Total then is $73.7 million for option 4. So here is a recap of all those different options. And in the smaller text there in the second column, just kind of rehashes each one of those options that we talked about as we walked through those, and then their total estimated cost. In the second column, overall cost, including the deferred maintenance. And then lastly, potential durations of projects, design, construction. And, these are ambitious, but we're thinking that most of them can be done within a 3.5-year period. Now, one thing about the durations is that these are not end to end, one after the other, because it would take a lot longer to do those that way. These are considered simultaneous projects in order to be able to stay within that time frame.
some of the other options that were presented, but ultimately eliminated through the rubric analysis by the school board, involved secondary buildings. One, the cost was far greater to build a secondary building, well beyond $100 million solely for a building alone, but also the duration. There was a domino effect. So if we wanted to build a new high school and move the middle school to the high school and turn the middle school into an elementary school, just that consistent domino, and it was getting us out 7-8 years to completion of the work. And so those two variables alone lowered the rubric score and resulted in the removal of those options. And these 4 options scored the highest. While all may not feel ideal, none of them may feel ideal, quite frankly, but while not one is necessarily rising to the top, they definitely scored the highest in the rubric analysis with the board.
I do have a question. Both the only locations that were proposed for a new school were middle school area. Is that where the data is pointing where that school should be if we go for a new school option?
The fourth elementary school next to the middle school is, some of the data that was asked about earlier with the location of where every student lives could impact whether or not that's a wise decision or not. We have that data being developed, but that was a property that is central to the middle and the high school, and so it made sense to have that in the complex of buildings and an available site. But there hasn't been a study of all available sites in the county.
I don't know if it's common knowledge, but it's not a secret that we are owed some property from the developer. And having that water system may be overtaxed for the school there, which would also be a consideration. So that's having those dots we've seen it with social services where we see where our populations are over that. Might be, that was picking the right spots.
We have that. Excuse us for passing notes in class, but we have property at Carmel Church Station. We have a proffer $400,000 at Belmont, but I think that's for anywhere we decide to get over there. So we have other options.
20
have 20 acres.
And we got property in Pendleton. So we've got other places to consider, which is why I was asking you about where all the students are. Because we got a couple of places to choose from. But what I would like to see is, as we put these options together, like a chart, as I do option whatever I pick in 2026, I'm gonna have this much extra space. 2027, I'm this much space, and then 28, when I build a new school or whatever, I have that much space, because we could end up being totally overcrowded for 5 years. And a lot of people say, I hate this place, it's too crowded, they leave, and then we got a brand new school with nobody in it. Not that it's gonna be that drastic, but it'll be nowhere near capacity. So I would imagine, just my opinion, that we're gonna talk about a 5-year plan that we put together, because who's gonna pay for this? Oh.
Other questions?
Crickets? Crickets? Crickets, that was not rhetorical, that was a cricket. But that's the reality. Do I go to a referendum and say, we're gonna spend $85 million or whatever to improve school? If I do that, I don't get anything, I don't get a vote until November. So I'm a year out. I don't know where I can borrow $5, let alone $85 million.
Well,
Right
and
now.
part of our dilemma is even the middle school project we did, we're on a ban right They told us we couldn't borrow any more money until 27, and we're gonna carry that interest only until then. So with that insight, when I look at these numbers, I mean, Mr. Thomas, what do you think you'd have to raise taxes to just go to 64 million?
If you count 3 cents a million,
Right.
180 cents.
No, you'd have to go up about 22 cents to cover the debt service. Mr. Cully, what would, I mean, there's just a lot between now and then.
I do think,
If I may, and certainly I understand what you're saying, and we feel the same way. Right now, I think, and this is my opinion, I just think that our purpose right now is to put out what the needs are and to try and determine the direction that we need to go to meet those needs. And then certainly once that's done, we certainly going to have to talk about cost. Obviously we are. And we're going to do just like citizens do all over the country. When it's time to build a school, when it's time to educate children, we're going to do what we have to do to educate our children as well. But certainly we don't want to impose any hardship on the citizens that they can't afford. But at the same time, we don't want to sacrifice the education of our children either. And I don't think anybody in here wants to do that. So again, if we look at what the needs are and we look at the possible ways of addressing those, and we're going to do that through what we're doing right now. We're going to have meetings throughout the county and give citizens an opportunity to hear what's going on and to see what's going on and to see what the needs are. And then we're going to come up with a way to achieve that. But how we're going to do it or how much it's going to cost, it's kind of hard to determine how much it's going to cost if you don't know what you're going to do.
You know, the minimum is gonna cost $31 million.
Mr.
We know that.
Mr. Cully has a question.
On your slide, I just numbers to numbers and square footage. Bowling Green to add 5 classrooms was 12 million. No, add 5, no. That was a curve. And where is that slide? We didn't make it.
2 million for Bowling Green.
Yeah. All right, so the construction cost.
3.8
All right, yeah,
million.
very good. That's what I'm thinking. Great, I was like, all right, very good.
I'm glad he's going to be.
3, no, be 3 million.
5, yeah. 6. And you said what it was 25 for a smaller school?
28.
28 for smaller school.
I was trying to get to the square footage. So the construction cost should be about whatever the square footage is, $300 a square foot for a new school, $300 a square foot for addition. Is that, we're using similar numbers for,
I think we used a little bit higher for the addition because they tend to have a little bit more cost to them when you're attaching to a building and the complexity of addition versus a clean new site for a new building.
The Bowling Green Elementary is set up with a lintel in the wall to go to 6 classrooms.
It's got a knockout.
It's got a knockout that was done during the addition in 2011 or 2012. So that exists.
And could you possibly include the gym at Bowling Green as part of your project? No, I'm serious. It was well, it wasn't part of the original project. Then we were trying to add it, and we didn't have money to add it, so if we're gonna go with this much money, I don't see where another 300,000. That's what it was
We
then.
can talk about that at a later time. As far as adding things.
But that's part of the options you need to consider, because if you consider adding on the Bowling Green, you might as well add on the gym. So let's get the whole picture and not
Adding the gym at Madison too, right?
what?
Oh, they got a gymboree.
There is, but it's a very small.
They have a gymboree.
Gym, auditorium, cafeteria.
I do think I would be remiss if I just did not throw a couple of additional comments before we close for the night. And I'm so appreciative of the time and for our folks from RRMM being here with us. And of course, Tracy from the demography aspect. I think we can see by the data that time is of the essence. We have arrived, the children are here, and we need to come up with some sort of plan and of what I call it a bridge plan at minimum. Because what I don't think we want to see occur is a step that we've already been able to move away from, and that is a series of learning cottages in our backyards of our school buildings, meaning trailers. And so that is a step that I would love to see us avoid when feasible. And then I haven't had a chance to read the article, but I was made aware that there was an article in the Freelance Star this weekend. I don't know if anybody has had a chance to look at it, but it indicated, based on what was shared with me, that we're the 4th most rapidly growing county in the state by 9%. What was the number? 9.9%. Louisa, Goochland, Caroline, and another rural division. Oh, Marcia has it.
Yeah, Calvin.
So-
Can we have the rest of one more thing?
Oh, sure. It's certainly, any board member that would like to speak regardless, by all means. Definitely not a one-man show here.
I think the point was made earlier that the school board has been acutely aware of not only the data, but also the options. And I'm comfortable with all the options. Of course, I am sensitive to the budget constraints that our colleagues on the Board of Supervisors are faced with, but definitely to Chairman Taylor's global point, we need to come together to consider what we need to do to educate our children and then figure out the best approach to that. Those are my comments.
I'm very similar. It's not coming, it's not when, it's here. I mean, I'm a Lady Smith Elementary School. I hear often from the parents, it is at capacity. If we get any more families moving in, where are those kids gonna go? And no one, I'm sure, in Latham Village wants to see the trailers as the bridge plan. And so, again, we respect having budget and being fiscally responsible. Absolutely. But we have to, they're coming, the people are coming, and we need to do what we need to do.
I would simply add, one, certainly appreciate both boards coming together. The solution is going to be when both boards actually work out a viable, realistic solution that meets the needs that are pressing. We are benefiting from your efforts of bringing folks here. Okay, they're here. So we know that miracles aren't going to happen overnight. Buildings aren't going to appear overnight. $64 million isn't going to appear overnight. So what we have to do as a collaborative team is figure out how do we get to the desired end state of taking care of the children of this county, educating them, but yet not going to the poorhouse, which no one is suggesting, to get there. So we've got some heavy lifting ahead of us. And it goes back to a saying, my parents, there's needs and there are wants. We need to address what our needs are now to address what my colleagues and what I've heard here tonight. That's got to come across. But Madam Chair, it also goes back to a point you were trying to make earlier with regards to prioritization. We are going to have to, as a team, prioritize how we chart this course forward. I think there's not a whole hell of a lot that we cannot do together. as long as we are working together, transparency, and keep in mind, that's a lot of money. I know my peers get tired of me saying that, but that's a lot of money. So when I go down Sparta Road, and there are folks down there who are barely making it right now, and you want me to put on a heavy, we are not blind to that. We recognize that. Bottom line, though, is we still have a mission. We still have to educate our kids. And we just have to figure out how we're going to be able to do that together. And it's going to require all of us in here, all that are looking and watching. And like I said, there's not a whole hell of a lot that we can't do if we're doing it together.
My mother knew your parents. There were a lot of times when she said, separate your needs from your wants.
That's right.
And I think that's the big thing is we know what we need. I'm really, well, the thing is we have to have a plan. And how we get to whatever the option is part of that plan. Because we need to say, that's why I keep harping on prioritization. Can I do something this year? Can I do something next year? How do I eat this elephant? And I can only eat it one bite at a time, but I need to know where to start biting.
Yes, Mr. Bond.
If I may add, I mean, the only thing I disagree with Mr. Thomas a little bit on is the fact that I don't, we have a whole bunch of, I mean, my computer was talking to Mr. Kelly today about like the apartments in Pendleton. Pendleton is growing. I mean, a lot of these subdivisions were approved. Pendleton was approved when? 2001, Ladysmith Village, or I mean, and these subdivisions, most of these subdivisions were not new. This misconception that we're adding these subdivisions, they're already here. They're already here. And I mean, when you start, like the way the Pendleton's growing, we need to, putting a Band-Aid on something right now is going to end up costing us more down the road than actually, I mean, I'm even questioning, is a 450, student elementary school, is that going to be enough? When you're talking about 9% growth in a matter of 4 years, 3 years. I mean, there's something, and it's like, we're in that district. If you live in the Madison district, if you live in the Western Carolina district, you're facing that's where the population is booming. And we're going to have to do something because they're running out of space. And it's in Pendleton, you just go to Pendleton and see what's going on. And a 5-year plan is going to be like, well, then we're going to have to start, we're going to be building a school. We have to figure something out long term. We need to do 10, we need 10, like, I think we should be planning for 10 years, 15 years based on, because the growth is coming. I mean, it's all pushing south. As long as you have prices in Spotsylvania and Stafford and Prince William going way up, people are pushing this way.
Okay, so you really don't agree with me. I just use 5 as an arbitrary.
Yeah, right. Okay, but yes, like long term. I mean, I think 5 is a very short number. I think 10, 15 years down the road.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. But this is what you guys said for 5 or 10 years. And 3 to take care of the first
Long-term, do the 10-year, growth period.
Would it be helpful before we, I'm sorry.
I just want to add, and I do appreciate the conversation regarding the $31 million of deferred maintenance that was alluded to in the presentation. However, but correct me if I'm wrong, that number, if it's eaten all at one time, doesn't add one single classroom to our current capacity.
That's why I say that's the minimum we have to spend, because we have to spend $31 million to get the shells and the facades and the structures in shape. Then we got to add space, which is some other dollars.
Well, I guess I don't know if that's an either or proposition. I guess that's my
but if I get rid of one of the buildings. All right, do you guys know?
I'm going to suggest to my board is that we set a time or a date when we have a work session on this, where we can discuss things, and then in the future, we can get back together. But we're not going to come to any decision tonight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We anticipate many meetings. Would it be acceptable if Marcia read over the takeaway action items just to make sure we haven't excluded anything that we all agreed to bring forward? There's like 3 or 4 things that people wanted us to do.
Okay, you guys, listen. Gentlemen, would you please listen?
Dr. Calvert, would
Go ahead.
would this include a alternative suggestion for the transportation?
Could it
Throw this
include?
out there?
Absolutely.
Could.
Absolutely.
We own the land that's surrounds that facility currently. Needing more land and adding a bay, if that makes that facility more serviceable, I think it's a much cheaper option than $7 million. That would be my suggestion as a cost cutting measure. That we add on to the building, add on to the footprint of the facility. Don't get start something else.
Completely agree that that is a viable option. In addition to the deferred maintenance that's already been noted, I believe if I'm pulling from my memory banks correctly, that building is a poor fare. So we'd have to, of course, entertain the deferred maintenance if we were to maintain them.
A rental in addition.
Correct. Correct.
Absolutely.
That's certainly something discussed.
Yeah.
But these,
Most definitely.
the last thing that these 4 options, as good as they are not necessarily our only choice.
Yes.
No.
Correct. We could build a 5 and a 6 based on all of your thoughts, the community thoughts. We have meetings coming up with every single PTA. We have meetings coming up at churches. So we are going to be doing this Foursquare activity and then compiling all of that feedback. We'll share all of that with you. We'll come back for another joint meeting and then we'll see. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So for follow-up items that I recorded is we're going to send, Mr. Hughes has requested enrollment for school quarterly in working with them, so we will do that. Sending the information on the vacant building that we had discussed previously, refreshing that again. Mr. Thomas, we wanted where to build, kind of in our recommendations, thoughts, where the students are at. And then, Mr. Thomas, would like to know space by 5-year plan, how much overcapacity at each school per year. And then just a couple alternatives or recommendations for us to just add to our list of options that we're looking at. Mr. Thomas asked about the gym at renovation, at a BGE renovation, and then Mr. Forhan's transportation item. So we'll add those as, possible recommendations for other items too. And then we'll follow up on the 4 items for you all.
Do we forget anything that may have come up?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor, there is one that I noted, the Lewis and Clark deed, to revisit that. I also had as an action item in my notes.
Marcia, the Lewis and Clark.
Yes, Ms. Rollins-Bells, Dr. Rollins-Bells, I'll ensure I have that. I do have it written down. It wasn't my follow-up column.
Hey, did you want to say something?
And most of the stuff that I was going to say will probably come up later from the superintendent student advisory meeting. Just stuff about having the Lotus Academy on near the high school, connected to the high school. There were a lot of concerns about that from the students in that meeting, just about safety and release time, about why the students get sent there and the reasons, and then how that will affect the other students on in the actual high school, after school is dismissed, and just that kind of community being on the school grounds and the reasons that they were sent to that place in the first place. And just concerns about parking, I know, the faculty parking lot and where that would go. But just mainly those were the concerns from that meeting. I haven't really heard much else, but I'm planning on talking to some students about that. So I'll hopefully share that at the next board meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't have anything else. We can.
How do we
Mr. Sadler?
share?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sutton. I'm sorry.
I believe Dr. Feld has comments.
Oh, sure. Dr.
Yes, sir. The only other comment that I had was to say this was a great meeting. I really enjoyed the questions and hearing from both perspectives. And as we continue to move in the community and we do our constituent meetings, I just wanted to take the opportunity to say we look forward to collaborating with each of our partner board members to do these poster tours and conversations in the community. So I'm looking forward to our continued work together. Great meeting, everybody.
Thank you.
How do you want us to handle questions, comments, ideas? Send them to I send them to county administrator, you send yours to Dr. Calveric and then they exchange?
That would be great.
We can do that.
And then when we compose a response, we'll make sure we get it out to everyone on both boards.
Yes, and I appreciate you sending out the response to our board.
Mhm.
One problem, you always use school board members as a tag because you got your school board.
Yes.
When I reply, it's not going to them.
So you need me to put them in individually?
Okay.
Easy request. Sure.
Mr. Chair, did I hear you ask for a motion to adjourn?
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion that the school board adjourn.
okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
I been moved and seconded, we adjourn, all in favor? Usual sign. A few nays can stay.
Supervisor, do I have a motion? Motion and a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Just me to carry it to the doctor.
See you, man. It's spilled it on my leg. I spilled it on